Hello, my name is Charlotte Waldraff. Today is April 9th and the time is 4 p.m. We are at Pewaukee VFW and I'm interviewing Jerry Witt, who was born on June 30th, 1946 in Milwaukee and served in the Vietnam War between 1967 and 1969. Mr. Witt was a sergeant in the Army and served as a scout dog handler. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. It's nice to be here with you, Mr. Witt.
Well, same here.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and start with the questions.
Sure.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, actually, just before I entered the service was a very interesting year in 1967. I had gotten married in May. I graduated from technical school in June, and in August I got the letter from the government saying that they wanted to draft me into the military. So in August of that year, I was inducted into the United States Army.
Okay, what was being drafted like?
Well, it was certainly a shock because I had thought that maybe I wouldn't be called for two reasons. Number one, I had a compression fracture of my back in high school playing football, and secondly, I had thought that maybe I wouldn't have been called, but they waited until I graduated from technical school. And unfortunately for me, they asked me to bend over, touch my toes, which I did, and they said, "Thank you, you're in the military." That's what happened in 1967, and from there I started my service.
What was your opinion on the war before you were drafted?
Well, you know, like that period of time, the social aspect of this country was a lot of people were against the war. However, when I found out that I was going to be in the military, I actually figured to myself, you know what, I'm going to do my duty. And my grandfather served in World War I. My father served in World War II. So I thought, you know, I've got to do the same thing because I'm really proud of where we live, and I think that this is a great country. So I wanted to do my part to be in the military.
So once you were drafted, what did you originally train for?
Well, originally I was sent to Fort Ord, California, and there that was after my basic training. I was sent there for my advanced individual training, and I was with a weapons platoon, and that simply meant that we were being trained with the use of mortar, and we spent 8 weeks going back and forth to the range, and I had figured, well, you know, I'm going to be a weapons guy, and things kind of changed near the end of that. You can ask me.
All right, what changed about that?
Okay, glad you asked. Well, with 2 weeks left to go with my training in Fort Ord, my company commander called myself and 2 other guys into his office, and he wanted to know if we might be interested in being a U.S. Army Ranger, because that's what he was. Mm-hmm. He said that they've been watching us 3, and he felt that we had what it takes to be a Ranger. And at the time, we had heard scuttlebutt that maybe our unit, entire company, might be going to Germany for 18 months. And we thought, we were hanging our hopes that maybe that will come true instead of having to go to Vietnam. So my company commander said, take 2 weeks to think about it. And he said, I'll come back and ask you in 2 weeks. Well, we talked about, the 3 of us guys talked about it and said, no thanks, we're not gonna do this. Not because we weren't fit to do it, but it was just, we had found out that you had to go through 12 weeks of survival training in some Okefenokee swamp somewhere. And we had to re-up for 2 years in the military, and it meant an automatic tour of Vietnam. So 2 weeks went by, we went back in, the company commander asked us again, and we politely refused, and he abruptly dismissed us. 2 days later, we had graduation, and after pomp and circumstance of all the marching and whatever, we were handed out orders. And my name being Witt, I was with the 4th Platoon, and I wasn't gonna get mine till W's came up. But by the time it was time for me to get my orders, I had heard a lot of guys yelling, and they were so excited. And it was true, the whole unit was gonna go to Germany for 18 months, except for 3 guys. We were gonna go to Scout Dog Training School in Fort Benning, Georgia. So my platoon sergeant said, I said, well, what does that mean? He looked it up and he says, well, you're gonna train with a dog for 12 weeks. And he says, what you're gonna end up doing is you're gonna lead patrols through the jungle and try to detect the enemy before they detected us. And at that point, it really got serious for me, because I knew that it was a tremendous responsibility that I was going to be laid upon, but I wanted to do my very best. So I ended up going to Fort Ord and started my training.
Do you want to tell me about your early weeks of training and how you adapted to military life?
Oh, sure. Well, you adapt there because you have to. But I met a lot of good fellas there that we were training with. We had a unit of 48 guys that trained at Fort Benning, and I was introduced to this dog right here. His name is Duke, and he was a white and black German Shepherd, and he didn't have any training whatsoever. So for the first 4 weeks, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's all we did was work on obedience. And at the end of the 4 weeks, we had those dogs lined up 50 yards away, taking hand signals. And then after that, we worked maybe an hour or two still for the rest of the 8 weeks that we were there on obedience, but more so on our mission, which is for them to try to pick up scent of personnel in the area, or scent left behind on booby traps or in tunnels and what have you. And so that was our training. And at the end of the training of the 12 weeks, we learned that our dogs were not going to go with us to Vietnam. And I thought, wow, that's pretty awful. And they said the reason, they didn't tell us this until the end, because they said these dogs have to go through the program twice to make sure that they're going to be workable. So that ended my training as a scout dog handler in as far as my training. But then I went home on a 30-day leave, and from there I was sent to Vietnam.
How was the transition from training to actual Vietnam?
Well, it was kind of scary at first, and when I got there, I was assigned to the what they call the 1st Cavalry Division, and I was assigned to what they call the 34th Infantry Platoon, which was all scout dogs. So I had a unit that had roughly about 27 guys in it. We were all dog handlers. And when I got shipped to our division headquarters, which was in An Khie, Vietnam, in the central part of South Vietnam, I met my commanding officer, and he assigned me to a dog named Skip, and he was a black and tan German Shepherd, and we had to acquaint ourselves for the next 2 weeks. I had to learn how he alerted. He had to learn and actually tell me what I needed to know. And I mean that literally, because he had been there for a year and almost 2 years. So I learned very quickly how he alerted on personnel, how he alerted on tripwires and booby traps, and how he alerted on tunnels. And I had to, the thing that we had to do as a team, he worked out ahead of me, off leash. There was a lot of them that worked on leash. Our unit strictly worked off leash. As long as I could see him, he could work off leash. And I had to concentrate on watching him, because how he alerted. If it was personnel, it was usually pretty easy. He'd stop, his ears would go up and his nose would twitch. And I knew then that it's a strong alert, so there must be personnel in the area. At that instant, it was my responsibility to quote unquote read the wind, because dogs will always alert into the wind. And just to give you a quick example, if I'm walking down a tree line on my left and the wind is blowing from left to right, my dog might pick up the scent facing to the right, only because the wind comes across the tree line and swirls down. Doesn't happen all that often, because most of the time we're working in trails, and the trails will be scent driven by the path that it's on. And so at that point in time, I would have to realize how strong is that alert? We need to take cover, and we'll go from there. If he's down, puts his head down and kind of stops and is looking down, and he's not, the scent isn't all that strong, it's a possibility he could be alerting on a tripwire or a tunnel. And then we'd have to stop, and I would tell my company commander that I was with that day what's going on. And it's interesting, because we worked, when we went to the field, we worked for 3 days with various units of the 1st Cavalry Division that were in the field. After 3 days, we would have to come back to our forward base and give the dog some rest and the handler some rest before we could go out again. And altogether, I figured I worked somewhere between 30 and 35 missions during my time there. So that's how it worked.
So to go back from when you originally got to Vietnam, how did you get to Vietnam? Like, what was your mode of transportation?
Oh, well, we left Oakland, California, after being up all day, all night. We left at 6 in the morning on a orange, blue, and white Braniff airline, which was a chartered civilian plane. And literally there was probably, I'm guessing, 300 men on board. And it was a tense time in the air. I mean, we're looking at 18 hours with one stop for fuel in Hawaii, another stop in the Philippines for fuel. The only time we got out was when we were in the Philippines. We got out for about a half an hour. And it was filled with emotion. You're wondering what's going to happen to us. And everybody on that plane knew that we were going to be in danger, number one. Everybody in that plane had different types of occupations. And it was pretty silent and pretty, low key, if you will. Tried to get some sleep. So then when we arrived in Vietnam, the very first thing that I noticed, that we all noticed when we were coming in for a landing, is all of these, there were smoke coming up all over the place. And I wondered, what the heck was that? Well, when we landed, we finally found out what it was. we landed at 6 in the morning, and the Army had a full day planned for us, and that was really awesome, because we had no sleep all that time. But the first question we all asked was, what is that burning stuff? Well, in the morning, all the barracks and everything, they have to empty out the latrine, and it's like half barrels of, a barrel cut in half, and it was filled with you-know-what, and what they did is they poured kerosene in there and they lit it on fire. And I went, oh my God, what an entrance into Vietnam, and that was it.
Okay. Wow.
And then we processed that whole day, and it wasn't until like around 6 o'clock at night that we finally were able to get some sleep. And then the next day we were assigned to our various units, and we were shipped to, in my case, An-Khe, where the main kennels were for the 1st Cavalry Division, and that's when I met my CO and got introduced to my dog.
Sorry. Do you want to go back to the map there?
Sure.
Can you just show where you originally landed in, and then
Okay.
where you
When
went
we
after?
originally landed, we landed at Cam Ranh Bay, which is right down here near Saigon.
Mhm.
And then after we processed, I moved up to An-Khe, which is right here in the central part of South Vietnam. After we went through my couple weeks of training with my dog, then we got on a helicopter and we went all the way up. There's a city called Hue, H-U-E, and we were just north of there, not far from the DMZ. It was called LZ, meaning landing zone, Evans. And what it was a forward base of operation for the infantry, and we had our forward kennels there, or our forward area there. And from there, when we went out, we would go to the chopper pads in the morning with our dog, with all of our gear, all of the food that we needed for the dog for 3 days, get on a helicopter, and we would go out and meet infantry units. And the 1st Cavalry Division, the infantry units were working right near the DMZ. See, it says where it says Khe Sanh? We were below that. And those red lines, that's the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's the route that the North Vietnamese Army took to, they went around the DMZ, and they were in Laos, and then they would gear up, and then they would have infiltrate into South Vietnam. Our job with the 1st Cavalry Division was to intercept them in the Ho Chi Minh Trail and engage with them. And so it was really quite important, because all I ever did when I was in the 1st Cav for the first 9 months that I was there, we fought nothing but the North Vietnamese Army. North Vietnamese Army was an army that had complete uniforms. Their personnel was as young as ours, maybe younger, but they knew how to move through the jungles. And we tried to, with the use of the dog, try to sense where they are and engage them before they engaged us.
Wow. When you first arrived, what were your living conditions like? Like, how was the food? Where did you sleep?
Well,
Those
actually,
kinds of things.
when I finally got to An-Khe, to our headquarters and main kennels, we had no problems with food, because we would get in a deuce and a half, and we would drive to the mess hall for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was not a problem. Once we got shipped to our forward base, we still didn't have too much of a problem, because they had a mess hall there. Where it became a little hairy is when we were out in the field. And as much as they tried to get us hots, one hot meal a day, they would bring it in with helicopters. and we would set up our perimeter, and then they would bring in the choppers would land, and we would be able to get food that way. But there were many times where they couldn't get in because we were in dense jungle, and we would have to eat our sea rations and what have you. And it wasn't so bad for me. I'm there for 3 days. I can deal with this. And I had kind of a special type of meal that they gave us handlers. It was called a long range patrol, and what it was dehydrated food called we called them lurps. But when I was finally realized all these guys that were out in the field, they're out there for 30, 60, 90 days at a time, I would give one lucky guy this meal, because all you had to do was heat up water, and all of a sudden you got a hot meal. And I would eat the sea rations because I knew in 2-3 days I'm going to be back. And so I just kind of felt sorry for a lot of these guys because they had it tough. The infantry units out there had it tough, and humping through the jungles and not knowing, what they're going to run into. Intense.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, what did a typical day look like for you on a mission?
On a mission?
Yeah.
A typical day would be, I would get up at probably 5 in the morning. I would be at the chopper pad with my dog and all my supplies on my back, my weapon, flak vest, helmet, the whole thing. And we would board a chopper, and that they had instructions as to where to fly, to which unit I was going to be working with. And so I would get on the chopper with my dog, and we would sit like I'm sitting right now, only this is the deck, and the runners are there, and my feet were dangling out of the door, and it's so cool. It's so cool, and my dog is sitting here on my left. It's cool only when you're coming into a landing zone, and it's not what they call a hot LZ. Hot LZ means we're taking fire, and it happened to me maybe a half a dozen times where the chopper pilot would say, we're going in hot, and if you saw red smoke popped, that meant it was a hot LZ we're going into, which meant that as soon as that chopper got close, you got off and you took cover. If it wasn't, then there was not a problem. But, and then once I got off there and the chopper took off, I had to report to the company commander of that infantry unit, and he would brief me as to what the mission is of the day. And in that section of Vietnam and where we were, make no mistake, we were in Laos. Couldn't tell anybody that. Couldn't write home that. That's true. Because the Ho Chi Minh Trail is in Laos. Mm-hmm. And so he would tell me where we're going to go, showed me on the map, and then I would go up to the front and I would talk to whatever platoon it was, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. And I would say, I'm going to be leading the way, because I had to be out in front by at least 25 to 30 yards. And then my dog out ahead of me. It had to be that way because the scout dogs needed to try to be as silent as possible up there. They can't be back here where they're hearing a lot of noise from the troops behind. So we were out there, we were exposed. And so that was a typical day. And if we made it to the end of the day, we would set up a perimeter. We would sleep at night. My dog would be right next to me, and it was sort of kind of neat. And then 6 in the morning, we would get up and do the thing all over again. And then the 3rd day, we would do it. And that night would be the last night that I was there, because in the next morning, when they got resupplied with the helicopters, I would get on that chopper and would take me back to my forward LZ. And at that point, my name would go to the bottom of the list. And as the units called in for handlers, my name would keep rising until it was on top. The next call, I'd have to get ready to go out. that was how we worked it up there. And approximately every 6 weeks, we, meaning myself and my dog, went back to on K, the division headquarters, where our main kennels were. And at that time, our veterinarian technician would check the dog over, head to toe, and check him all over. And I would have a chance to relax for maybe anywhere between 2 and 3 days before we got on a chopper and went back. That was a typical routine that was going on over there.
Do you want to tell me about your dogs?
Yeah, Skip, well, let me show you Skip. That's Skip, and he was a really, really gentle dog. He loved to smile. He was a camera freak. He loved it, and he and I had a bond that we were very close all the time, and there was a body harness, and once the body harness went on Skip in the morning, he knew that once that body harness was there, it's time for him to work. And the only time it came off was when we were taking a long break or at the end of the day where he could relax and I could relax. But other than that, he and I had a tremendous bond. I could tell from his alerts, what was going on and what kind of a strength of the alert was. And we had a good communication. So.
Did you have another dog later on?
Yes, I did. I will show you. That's helicopters, how we got around. That's how just some random pictures of handlers. That's him when he came back from a mission. And we were working after we had indicated that we found out that there was probably a battalion size of enemy. We were a company of about 120 men. And what ended up happening was we got up one morning and it had rained the night before, very heavily. And the ground was sopping wet and there was a light fog on the ground. And what happens is the dogs alert on tripwires and tunnels and stuff, but on scent left behind human beings. But when it rains, that scent gets washed away. So we were going through an area that was heavily booby-trapped. We knew this because we had lost 3 dogs and we had 2 wounded of my fellow dog handlers the week prior to that. So when the name came up, we were going back into the same area. And my CO said, "Witt, you're up next." I said, "Okay." So I got geared up and I'm ready to go the next morning. He says, and my company commander up at LZ Evans says, "I'm going with you." And I looked at him, I said, I didn't say, "Sir," I says, "Are you nuts?" I says, "No, you're not." I says, "It's too dangerous." He says, "No." He says, "I'm gonna go with you on this mission." He was the guy that was behind me, shotgun. And I said, "Okay, your decision." Well, we were started down this trail in the morning and we weren't working more than a half an hour. And all of a sudden, Skip stopped. And it was kind of weird because I never really saw him react that way before. And he turned around and he looked at me and all of a sudden I could tell what he was saying. He said, "I'm in trouble." And I realized then he was into a tripwire. So we went down, we took cover because we didn't know if there was personnel there. And I said, "Skip, stay." And well, he tried to move back, get away. And the tripwire must have got caught in his hairs or his harness, and it exploded, and he went down. And I opened fire because I didn't know if there was personnel in the area. I unloaded my magazine, and we called for medevac, medic, and finally he came up there, and I was by him, and the medic told me he's wounded in 3 places. He's in the shoulder, he's got one in the leg, but he's got a sucking chest wound, and so he prepped him. By then, the medevac chopper came. We put him on a stretcher. We took him down to Saigon, and he underwent surgery. There's a picture of him lying on that, and the doctors came out after about 4 hours, and they told me that, your dog made it through. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. And it was the first time that I could actually breathe. So, but the next day, the 2 days after that, I was told by the doctors that unfortunately he came down with a staph infection, and they couldn't stop it, and they had to euthanize him. And it was a really, really, really bad day for me. We put him in a body bag and got him on a chopper, took him back to our unit at Onkay, and we buried him. And that afternoon, my CO called me in to his office, and he says, I need for you to pick a dog now that's available. And I just thought at that moment, I'm sorry, can I say this? I thought, you son of a bitch. I don't even have a chance to mourn my friend, my dog, and you're telling me I need to get another dog. Well, I followed orders. I asked for one of the best dogs that we had in the platoon other than Skip that I knew of. And there he is. His name is Satan. He was a black lab German Shepherd mix. And his handler that he had before, I knew him, I knew of the dog, and I knew one thing else. This dog, once you got to be his handler, ain't nobody gonna get close to you. He had been there for 4 years, and he hated getting shot at. He hated getting incoming. And so he and I worked it out where I said, well, I'm coming in and I'm putting the collar on you. And he looked up at me and says, you can do that. I'll be your dog, but I'll be the boss. And I said, well, I'm fine with that. So he became my buddy that I had for the rest of my time in the field. And his name was Satan. And for good reason, because not a lot of people, I was the only one that could get close to him. I had to be really careful in the field, especially at night, when guys got up to go to the bathroom, that they would know where I was. And one instance already, I remember, he had a hold of a guy's pants leg, and this guy was so scared. And I said to the guy, I said, I told you, don't get close to him. And I said, Satan, come here. And he released and came back. So he was a good partner, and he kept me safe for the rest of my tour. But I'll tell you something, after losing Skip, it really affected me. And I didn't know whether or not I was going to make it home. Not because the dogs didn't do their job, because they did. But we knew, and I was told this the very first day that I got up to Onkay and was introduced to my dog. My CO said, I just want you to know that the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, if they can come back with the ear of the dog cut off, which had their serial number in it, tattooed, and the dog tags of the handler, they would get extra pay. So we knew that there was a bounty out on both of our heads. And it really made us be more alert and what have you. And then it was about a month after Skip died. I came back from a mission, and one of the guys picked me up with the truck to take me back to our area. And he's normally he was a sergeant, and he was always laughing and trying to keep your spirits up high. And he was very glum, and I put Satan in the back. I got in the cab. We started down. I said, "What's wrong with you? Did you have worms for breakfast?" And he just kept straight faced and kept driving. And I said, the next thing I knew, I says, "Who?" And he still didn't say anything. And he just kind of gave me a glance, and I said, "No, tell me it's not Ski." This is a picture of my friend Richard Bonashevsky. He and I went through training at Fort Benning, and he was from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. And there was another fella, his name was John Best. The three of us were really, really tight. We were all handlers up and together. And I found out that Ski was killed in action, and so was his dog. And boy, I tell you what, that was one of the worst days ever. After that, and I just felt like I'm never going to come home. It was really weird because I didn't even want to write home anymore. And it wasn't until maybe a month later before I finally wrote another letter home. And I finally was able to overcome that, but it was the realities of war. And the things that we saw when we were out in the field, going through the villages and seeing the death and seeing man's inhumanity to man. And it was very tough on me. So I'm sorry, I went off too much, I probably did.
No, don't worry
You
about
can
it.
ask me some more questions, I'm sorry.
Well, I know I and most of the people watching can only imagine what you were going through, so thank you so much for sharing those personal stories. Yeah, so we can, I just wanted to ask you kind of more of a broader question now, is what do you consider to be your most important contribution during your service?
Saving lives. Because I can tell you that the work that we did as a team, Scout Dog team, we saved a lot of lives. And I know this. And I was very proud of that fact, that we were able to do that. Being in combat was hard, because once we engaged, I was right up in front. And there was a lot of times when I didn't think that me or my dog, because once he alerted and we started to engage, I called my dog back to my side, and they knew they were trying to also protect me, but it was very, very hard because you're trying to focus on staying alive and engaging with the enemy. And so there were many times when I went on missions and I really didn't come in contact with with any engagements, but there were several where there was a lot of action. So the toughest part of all that, is to see your comrades being wounded and killed, and you're thinking to yourself, why War is hell, no matter when it was. Our fathers, our forefathers, going all the way back to the birth of this country, they all fought, and it was all bloody, and it was, in the end, for the greater good. And I just wish that Vietnam would have been for the greater good. Because in the end, we pulled out. And the communists eventually took over again. So I don't know. Was it worth it? I don't know. I didn't make those decisions. Somebody else higher up than me, beyond my pay grade, did. All I know is that we went over there because we thought we were doing a good thing. And by saying that we want to get through this day, and then the next day, and then the next day until we're short and we can go home. And that was it.
One final question I wanted to ask you, kind of going off with what you were saying, is what were some life lessons you learned from the military service?
The life lessons were that to cherish life and to cherish what you have at home and try and do your best to maybe educate a lot of the people about what you did, why you did what you did. It was very difficult to do that when I came home because the political climate here was that they looked at you like you were some sort of disease when you came home. And I didn't talk about it for close to 20 years. And it was also a time period where I came home like a lot of people from Vietnam, where you buried it inside because we're tough. We can handle it. Well, let me tell you something. It wasn't that way because so many of us got messed up inside of our heads. And personally, I can tell you I was not a good person. I had a lot of issues, and it wasn't until I finally sought help in the early 80s. And it took me a year and a half of intense therapy to finally get my head screwed on right. And but I think that since then, the military has learned a lot of lessons because of Vietnam. And it's all good things, I think, because nowadays when you come back from your tours, they offer help, psychological help. In fact, I think it's mandatory that you at least go once now, and that if there's help available. But when you think about Iraq and you think about Afghanistan, I have a very good close friend who was a dog handler in Afghanistan. And he and I have had lengthy conversations about, and the things were never, the war was different, the weapons were different, but it's all the same. There's heartache, and there's lots of heartache sometimes when you come back home. So I've been doing a lot of talking, and since 1991, I've done a lot of presentations in schools, civic events. I've done probably over 200 presentations, and it's helped me heal. And it's helped me be able to spread the word about what happens in war, and that we should really be proud of this country and try to do what we can to make this country a good place to live. And I feel that way now, and I'll always feel that way. This is the best country in the world to live in.
All right. In closing, this has been an interview of Jerry Witt regarding his service during the Vietnam War. My name is Charlotte Waldraff. The time is 4:45 p.m. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I appreciate it.
I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.